Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on AI guidance toolkits. We are going to give folks about a minute to come in, but thrilled for those of you who have already joined us. All right, welcome. My name is Adriana Harrington. I am the Managing Director of Policy here at Excel and Ed, so work across all of our policy sets. And this bucket falls under digital policy for AI, taking over from Amy Owen, who was leading this network previously. I am thrilled to be joined by Drew and Ashley today to dig into the nitty-gritty of AI toolkits, state level support, and how it is being used as a tool to kind of really support teachers and principals and students to strengthen how they're leveraging AI. We know that teachers have a ton of different ed tech tools that they have been using over the course of the years, but AI is a concept of how to leverage technology, and then there's lots of tools that fold in on top of it, and a lot of promise from this amazing capacity that we can now see in our technology, and also a lot of unknowns and making sure that it is appropriately leveraged. So we're going to dig into the state level role today. Joining me is Drew Thompson from Innovate Ohio and Ashley McBride from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Both are pioneering states that have dug into how to support from a state level AI across different stakeholders, and you'll hear more about that in a minute. But I'm going to turn it over first to Drew and then to Ashley to introduce themselves.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. I do communications and project management at Innovate Ohio under the leadership of Ohio Lieutenant Governor John Husted. He directs 3 different offices, and innovation and technology is one of his top priorities. So when the world changed a year and a half ago with AI, he wanted us to dive right in and identify how we could lead, and we've been proud to do that for the last year and a half.
And I'm Dr. Ashley McBride. I work for the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, where I serve as the section chief for our state's digital learning initiative, which is just a really long way of saying I am in charge of our state's digital learning plan and all of the things that we do to support schools with digital teaching and learning.
Great. Well, thank you both for being with us today. Participants, feel free to type in the chat any questions you have along the way. We will hope to save time for Q&A at the end of the session. But I'm going to start with a pretty broad question. Ashley, if you'd like to go first, which is why? Like, why did you embark on writing a toolkit? Who did you bring along with you, kind of the stakeholders? And how does it fit into the kind of larger priorities that you have as a state?
So we were getting a lot of questions at the department when generative AI first came out. So we had a lot of tech directors saying, you know, my boards of ed, my teachers are asking a lot of questions, and what do we say? So it was in support of them. But additionally, we were seeing a lot of posts and a lot of things on social media and a lot of rhetoric around how AI is primarily used for cheating. Like this is a cheating tool. This is how our students are never going to have to think again, and things along those lines. And we knew that we needed to make sure that everybody understood that just like every other digital tool that's been out before, it is just a digital tool, but it has some different rules and different parameters we've got to look at. So our chief information officer, Dr. Vanessa Wren, came to me and one of our consultants, Vera Cubero, and had a conversation with us about, hey, can we go ahead and get some guidelines together and things along those lines? And our primary stakeholders are our school districts. So the people who will benefit from our toolkit are the school boards, tech directors, teachers, everybody who's in that K-12 environment. We laser focus in on that. And we wrap everything that we put in there around our state's digital learning plan. So in 2022, we rewrote our digital learning plan. And that plan is what we use to help make sure that we are supporting all aspects of solid teaching and learning, not just digital teaching and learning, but solid teaching and learning in every classroom. So that's kind of how we set it up. And then we had some internal teams and a lot of research that went into making sure that all of those pieces were accounted for. And we also made sure to let everybody know. And if you open it up, you'll see, you know, this gets updated. We update it as it goes because AI is constantly changing. So.
That's great. And we'll hear a little bit more about the updating and the process for that. And it is very clear. Please click this link to make sure you have the most up-to-date one. Same question for you, Drew.
Yeah, so like I said, a year and a half ago when AI burst onto the scene, the lieutenant governor was at a roundtable with some technology leaders and was able to see firsthand some tools and some demonstrations on how it could be used. And one of our mission statement at Innovate Ohio is to make our state the most innovative and entrepreneurial state in the Midwest. And so you have to be engaged in this technology in order to do that. And so we wanted to lead the conversation. His direction to us was to make sure that we were seen as leaders in this space. And so we led conversations across the state in cities like Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. We brought in national leaders like Google and IBM and Microsoft, and we paired them with regional leaders in Ohio, like Ohio State and Case Western and the Cleveland Clinic. And we had some really insightful conversations, and we had a lot of educators attend. And we were not sure how engaged educators were on this topic. And so when we had our debrief, we got a lot of feedback from them, and they said, hey, we know this is important in the education space. We just don't know where to turn. There was two problems they identified. One, there was too many things out there. They were getting bombarded by the amount of resources. And two, the resources that were easily available were fairly surface level. There was not a lot of guidance. And so we set about to fill that immediate need with our education toolkit. And we are not AI experts, right? So we wanted to make sure we were speaking to experts in AI and in education. And our process was breaking down individually, one at a time. We did interviews with hundreds of different people across all of those sectors: technology, education, AI, and we began collecting all the information, and we really made it about them. We said, you tell us what you need, and then we continued to refine that, and we held workshops with stakeholders and other leaders, and eventually it became what we published in February. So.
That's great. And I want to just point out a couple of themes you've already started to draw out that are so important, that these both have been nested within a larger body of work, that you are making sure to draw out a through line from previous initiatives, and what you just said, Drew, the not knowing where to turn. And to your point, Ashley, about it, big concern was cheating, right? There's just so much unknown that needed to be explained and kind of worked through with folks to draw that forward. Ashley, you started to hit on your target audience with the districts and schools and who you work with. Could you unpack a little bit more, like what was the main information and categories that you kind of honed in on that you really wanted folks to take away from your toolkit?
Yeah, so like I said, we really focused on our digital learning plan, which starts with leadership and vision, and really getting leadership on board, getting your district leaders, boards of ed, all of them on board with what is the vision for AI in your school district, then leaning into that human capacity piece. And our human capacity talks a lot about professional learning and making sure that everybody is getting professional learning around this, that they're getting the resources that they need, they're getting lesson plans and things like that they can kind of take and make their own. And then looking at curriculum instruction and assessment, whenever we actually put this in the classroom, what does that look like? How do you have conversations with students? We have a stoplight graphic that's in there that talks about like, when is it not appropriate? That's a red light. When is it not appropriate to use AI? When is it okay? And when is it, yes, this is absolutely when you should be using it and how you should be using it. Then getting into that data privacy and cybersecurity, talking about when you're choosing AI related tools, then looking and making sure that you're keeping student and teachers' data safe. That's been a big initiative across our state in the last, ever since COVID, obviously, as it has for most people. But making sure that even students are aware of the fact that what data they put in can then be used for later iterations of AI. So just making sure that kids know, you know, maybe I shouldn't put my name and phone number and address in there, things like that. And then finally, the technology and infrastructure, making sure you actually have the devices and the software and all of those things, and they all speak to each other appropriately, and they all work seamlessly together to make sure that these environments that are being built using AI is actually building a solid instructional program for your students, and isn't just something where they're not learning what they need. Like, our real focus is, are they still focused on the curriculum? But
No, that's great. And I really like the red, yellow, green approach to kind of give parameters for folks to leverage off of. And data privacy absolutely paramount in what we're thinking about. To your point about iterations of AI, someone said the other day that this is the most rudimentary version we're ever going to have, which blew my mind because it already seems so just crazy in what it can do, but it's only going to grow and build from here. So Drew, kind of being housed under the broader work of the lieutenant governor, your toolkit in Ohio took a slightly different approach and is geared towards lots of different audiences. Could you talk about why that approach and kind of what main information you wanted to convey, given that you were reaching out to kind of a broader set of stakeholders?
Yeah, so one of the challenges we actually faced was when we finished our surveys, when we finished that data collection, we had a lot, we had a lot of information. So paring that down into something usable was actually the biggest challenge. And our goal was we wanted to help every type of educator advance AI literacy if they so choose, no matter where they were at on their journey. So from a superintendent, school board member, to a teacher and parent, those are very, very different things that you need to know. So humbly, our toolkit is very comprehensive, and our idea was someone could come to the online site and they could select exactly what they needed and disregard, or at least put in the back burner whatever they did not. So for example, if I'm a teacher, I don't necessarily need to know all of the different policies. You do need to know them, but you need to know the basic understanding of what AI is, why it's important, where AI can be used, the key terms, classroom integration, how to safely and effectively use it in teaching, the different resources that are available to you so that you can help students learn about or learn with AI, and then where those resources are for professional development. If you're a superintendent or a school board member or a principal, you need to know, what is my student data privacy policy? What is my cybersecurity policy? What's my procurement policy? All of which will be very important to the AI conversation, but you can go immediately to what you need and then come back later for what is secondary to your concern. So that is why we wanted to make sure all that was available, but we tried to set it up so that you could find what was best for you in the moment.
Was one of them harder to write than another one? Like, is there one that really stuck out that you're like, shoot, we got stuck on that particular stakeholder, or they were all equally?
The teacher part was a challenge. It's where the rubber meets the road, and there's a lot of great think tanks and articles and data that helps with the policy stuff, which is a lot of what our toolkit was, but there's so much unknown with what's actually going on in the classroom. So that was certainly a challenge for us.
Okay, that's great. Um, Ashley, your document is living. It is an alive version, updatable. Like, why did you choose to do that? What big changes have you had to put into it since it's already been undergone some revision since it was launched?
Yeah, so we actually have updated like that stoplight thing that I was talking to you about. We've updated that since it came out. Really, we get feedback from educators. We get feedback from technology directors and people who are in the field. Additionally, we have partnered with AI for Education, and we've done some work with code.org, and we've done some work with Digital Promise, and things that we've learned from those partnerships. We have rolled in here as we find other best practices, as we find, written out policies and things that when we see things from like Ohio or some of these other states that are putting things out there, we look at it, we evaluate it, and then we decide, yes, this needs to be in here because as you said, AI is the most rudimentary it's going to be. And it's going to keep growing and changing. I've seen some really cool demonstrations where they've put together like artificial intelligence with robotics, and this robot is like, they're working on robot butlers right now, and trying to make that a real thing. So Rosie the robot is not far off. I'm really excited about that, and so is my house, to make sure it stays clean. But it's changing so much that we knew that if we put it out there and put it in a PDF version and said, this is it wasn't going to work after about a week because something was going to change or something else was going to be introduced, or there's going to be a different type that comes out, or data privacy is going to change. Like the requirements for data privacy are constantly needing to change to make sure that we're refraining from having issues with bad actors. So we just wanted to make sure that what's out there is the most up to date. So if you print it today, next week, it may be a little bit different because we do a lot of technical corrections and things like that too.
I love that you took that approach. I have like version control PTSD from working at a state agency where it's like underscore final underscore V2 final in capital letters, and you're like, which one is it? Which how can we make sure that this is right and living for folks? Something intrigued me in what you just said. Do you have a piece of feedback that really stood out to you from an educator or someone that you've received? And you can think on that one if you need to.
Yeah, I'll need to think about that one. We've actually had a lot because we're working on some collaboratives and some summits and things like that. So we get a lot of feedback on it.
I love that. Pivoting a little bit, I want to pull on the string of policymakers, given that that is kind of our bread and butter as an org at Excel and Ed. So Drew, could you talk a little bit more about that specific toolkit and what you wanted to put into it? I know we've had a lot of conversations with legislators who have that knee-jerk reaction of, well, I'll just ban it until I can until I know what it is and I can figure it out. I'm like, no, it's real. It's happening now. Students are using it. Like, let's think about how we can work with you to make it feel right for you and your constituents. So could you talk a little bit more about that toolkit?
Yeah, I think absolutely right. This is not going anywhere. This is here to stay, is my first point. We were very careful that this was a resource that the state was providing. We have gone through some of the things that we trusted. We are packaging it. There's a lot of good stuff out there. We wanted to make it available. So we've done some of the vetting, but we were careful that it's not a mandate. So I guess point number two, it's critical that, especially from a state level, like North Carolina or Ohio, this is a resource. It is not a mandate. We were very, very specific in that messaging. My favorite section of our toolkit is actually a section called Guide to Guidelines. Like I said, there's a lot of great stuff out there, but going back to our forums, one of the things we heard from educators is, where do I actually go? Where do I turn? I can't just start Googling this stuff. So we took the best resources that we could find, and we actually dissected them and then made recommendations for who could use what. So for policymakers, again, going back to teacher, superintendent, principal, we actually broke it down. If you're a principal, this is great for you. These 4 are great for you. If you're a superintendent, take a look at these 4 or 5. If you're a teacher, just take a look at these 2. So again, always trying to meet the person where they were at so that they could focus on what they needed immediately. And then we've got a couple sections for policymakers specifically, but we wanted to make it as simple as possible. So we recommended 5 different steps. 1, understand the current situation, look at the existing technology. 2, identify the key values for your organization. 3, set those guiding principles, make sure you're developing rules based on safety, innovation, trust, and then create actionable policies. And actionable, I think, is something that we emphasize, because if it's not clear, if it's not achievable, then your policy is not going to go very far. And then make sure, and Ashley's mentioned this several times, make sure you're collecting feedback from those that are actually using and implementing the policy. So that was very important to us as well.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that one. Ashley, did you want to jump in?
I just loved what you said about it's a resource, not a mandate. We don't, DPI, we don't traditionally give mandates. One of the things to also remember is AI is so embedded in so many tools that we already use. So if you have a Google account, AI's in there. So if there was a ban across all the things, then the question is, where does that ban stop? Is it just specific resources like ChatGPT or something along those lines? Or is it like you can't use email anymore because it has AI summaries in it? And that's not feasible in the world that we live in. So just really, pausing, seeing where everything goes and looking at some of those best practices and saying, these again are resources. It's not a mandate, and letting people explore.
That's a great point. I know when we were prepping for this webinar a few minutes ago, we were talking about the kind of number of tech tools that teachers interact with over the course of their career. Could you talk a little bit more, either one or both of you, about the messaging around that and how to your point, Ashley, it's so pervasive, and how we're kind of thinking about it as part of other things and as a standalone.
I'll let Drew start the conversation because I think he started it earlier and I don't want to step on his toes.
I would just say there is a lot of money being made because vendors, rightfully are slapping AI on tools that may have been using AI for the last 10 to 15 years because it's the hot thing on the block. So just make sure that the tools you are using are the right tools, not because they say AI or don't say AI. Just, there's a lot of money being made. So
yeah, and ESSER made it so much worse with the number of tools thrown at teachers, and then whether or not they're actually getting training in it. Our state digital learning plan, one of the things that we point out is that there needs to be at least every 3 years, there needs to be a review on every digital tool that is purchased or used in the school district to see if it is still meeting the needs of the students, the actual instructional needs. It's not being used. Never will you ever hear us at DPI say, you need to use this digital tool with these students, and they should be sitting in front of a screen all day. That is never okay. We want to make sure that the screen time that is used is an instructionally sound screen time. So those evaluations for ed tech tools are extremely important, not just for data privacy, not just for how much money we're spending and making sure we're meeting our budget, but really to make sure that those tools are actually supporting the instruction of the students and including things like collaboration and critical thinking. And it's not a sit and get, tool that they're just watching a video and answering some questions, watching a video, answering some questions. That in every other, I just can't stress that enough, that there has to be good instructional value in those tools.
And I just want to point out that you have repeatedly honed in on curriculum, instruction, pedagogy, right? Like you're keeping the foundation of the core of your work and then thinking about how to leverage the tools on top of it, which is so important. Panelists, feel free to, I mean, not panelists, audience, feel free to put questions in the chat. I mean, you too can put questions in the chat if you want. But if you have questions for Ashley or Drew, please do put them in there. Where next? Like where do you kind of see AI going forward? How do you see your work evolving? I'll stop there. Drew, you want to go first?
Yeah, so we are very excited about where Ohio is headed with this. We saw the toolkit as filling that immediate need. It's something we were hearing, and we worked as quickly as possible to provide this resource. Where we're going now, I think we can be a little bit more strategic. And just last week, just a week ago, the Lieutenant Governor convened a meeting of Ohio's business, technology, education, and higher ed leaders. And we kicked off our AI and Education Coalition, which we're very excited about. And the goal of the coalition is to align all of Ohio's major influencers, major players behind a state level strategy. So I don't know if Ashley's seeing this in North Carolina, but what we're seeing in Ohio is there are AI enthusiasts that are doing a lot of great stuff, a lot of great work in their own network, in their own region of the state even. And everyone's doing great things, but everyone's doing their own thing. And so we are trying to at least corral folks a little bit so that we can all move in the same direction. Because it really is that pipeline between business, industry, higher ed, and education. And if that's not a seamless pipeline of talent, then the state's going to fall behind. And so we don't know where exactly this will go, but we're excited to start building that strategy and be a little bit more proactive and on offense instead of just reacting. So,
and just like Drew's doing in Ohio, we are pulling people together. We have digital learning initiative funds that has been provided by the legislature since 2016, I believe. And we have utilized some of those funds to create an AI summit along with some other ESSER funds that we were also given for this purpose. But we have an AI summit that we've had on both sides of the state. So we did one in the West and then we did one in the East so that people had accessibility to it, because our state is about 6 or 7 hours long from coast to mountains. So in that AI summit, we really focused on leadership teams, on superintendents, tech directors, and any other directors in those leadership teams. And we had some Board of Education members as well join us, where we brought people from some of our partners, Digital Promise and AI for Education. And then we had people who were doing AI or working with AI at their schools do presentations. So we had a tech director who was talking about how he's led visioning for AI and what their next steps are. We've got teachers, classroom teachers who were presenting about how they talk to their students about AI and things like that at these summits. In addition to that, we have an AI collaborative that we have met with for 4 different times, and the last time will be in June. And they are not only getting professional development about artificial intelligence, but they're actually designing lesson plans and designing professional development resources and policy resources to go into our open education platform. So then we can share it across the entirety of the state. So we're planning to do that again next year. And we're also planning on doing the Emerging Technology Summit. We're going to call it an Emerging Technology Summit because we have no idea where technology will be by next year. So we want to make sure that we keep, robotics and other things in our minds as well. So that's really where we're kind of going with this, is we are working with leaders We also have instructional support personnel, coaches and school library media coordinators that we do collaboratives for across the state. And we've been training them in how to support their classroom teachers. So giving them some time and space with it as well. And really just working to try to gather all of the resources across the state so everybody has access. So, the little pockets of innovation that are happening in one county don't just live and die in that county. They also, make it all the way over to the beach or all the way up into the mountains. So.
And that's huge that you're both kind of staying within the context of what you started with, right, Drew? You shared that you're bringing in business and technology and thinking about that broader scope because the charge down from the lieutenant governor, and actually you're thinking about the kind of direct stakeholders that NCTPI engages with. And for the AI collaborative, who's part of, like, is that educators who are?
Yes. So we have all different levels of educators. We have a few technology directors. We have a few coaches. We have some mentor teachers. We have some classroom teachers. We have school librarians. So we opened up an application. We had to turn away about 50% of the people who applied just because of
Wow.
space.
Yeah.
And time constraints and some funding constraints. So we're working on trying to make sure we can bring in another set of people next year and have a similar, we're just going to continue the work because it's going to continue changing. And we want to make sure that we can continue to give those resources out. So if a teacher who has never used or talked about AI wants to look at a good AI, a good lesson plan that utilizes AI, meeting certain content standards, then they've got some really strong examples that they can dig into and say, now how can I adopt this or adapt it to my classroom so it meets my students' needs?
That's huge. And North Carolina still has the statewide learning management system?
Yes, we have, it's a convenience contract. But yes, we have a couple of different options for learning management systems, but we do provide some professional learning for anybody in our state who needs it.
I was so jealous of that when I was in Tennessee. Such a huge opportunity there. Drew, I'm going to go off script for a second because you just brought up the AI and Education Coalition. Could you talk a little bit more about the business community and what you've been hearing from them throughout this process?
Yeah, it's very important. The business community, they've shined a couple of different lights on some things. One, the thing we've heard the most in the last week is it is critical that these types of initiatives, if you're pulling together a task force or a team, whatever you're doing to build this in your industry, it's so important that it's executive driven. So the CIOs and the IT folks and the technology folks, very important. But if this isn't coming from the top down, it's only going to go so far. So everybody needs to be bought in. Something very interesting that we've heard a number of times recently. I would say that's the biggest thing from industry. And then one other thing is, they want to make sure that we're not already behind, right? So we've talked about prompt engineering and how important prompt engineering is going to be. But in the last week, we heard, well, maybe that skill is AI is already, that's a skill we'll need for the next 2 years, but this is going to be something that's taken care of by the technology very soon. So it's just interesting to see how their minds are ahead of the game and we're still trying to catch up a little bit. So
yeah, that's fascinating. I'm going to have my colleague Heather hop on to ask our couple of questions from the chat, and then I have a final one for you both.
Thanks, Adriana, and thank you both, Drew and Ashley, for sharing. I definitely learned so much, and I'm sure that everyone who was watching also did. We have a few questions in the chat, and so the first question, someone is wondering, what has been the biggest lesson learned in terms of implementing AI into K-12 education in classrooms?
I think one of the biggest things we've learned is we need to get adults playing with some AI tools and really understand it a little bit better. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to somebody who teaches in a classroom or just works with students who has not just toyed with it.
Mhm.
And they don't have it's not for any other reason other than their time is just already so overloaded. So just giving the adults who are working with these students just time and space to sit down for even just an hour and say, here are 3 or 4 tools. I just want you to play with them, figure out if it can give you a good recipe, or if they're knitters or crocheters. I don't know if you've seen them on Twitter or on any of those YouTube channels or anything. There's some crocheters who will say, give me a crochet pattern for a shark. And when they actually follow the crochet pattern, it is not a shark. So just some of the things, just let them play with it so they can kind of understand it, so they can actually lead some of those conversations.
Yeah, and to echo Ashley a little bit, collaboration is so important. Like I said at the beginning, I am not an AI expert, and we're not expected to be AI experts, but we are expected to talk to those who are. So bringing in the experts from the education side with the technology side, that collaboration is key.
Great, thank you. I guess going off of that, do you either of you have any examples of successful implementation of different AI tools in schools that you have heard of?
We're still very much seeing a lot of people pilot, and I am a research and data driven individual, and we have not had a chance to sit down with the school districts who are starting some of this and do a deep data dive into it. So I'm afraid to say I've seen some really innovative things where they're working with students on just thinking and talking about what it is, how it can be used. For instance, like an English teacher who really got students to talk about tone of writing by plugging some stuff in for like a chat GPT or one of those other, I can't think of the names off the top of my head, but she just did the example and plugged it in. And then the students were like, oh, that doesn't sound like me at all. And as a former English teacher, do you know how hard it is to teach a high school student tone and writing?
Yeah.
Like that was something that I was just like, oh my goodness, just something as simple as sitting down and have those conversations. But when it comes to specific tools or when it comes to specific, like do this, do this, do this type things, we haven't done the research yet. That is something on the horizon for us. One of the things that I'm really working on next year is trying to dig into what people are actually doing and see if we can get some good research studies behind that, so we can make sure that all of our stuff is hitting best practice.
Love that so much. Both the tone and the plan for research.
Thank you, Ashley. Drew, if you don't have anything else to share, there's another question on someone is wondering how states are funding the innovation. Is the state funding it, or do they have grants?
I think it varies by state, obviously. But there is a lot of technology grants that can be used immediately to cover some of this stuff. So I will echo Ashley and stay away from specifics on that as well, but there is grant money available for some of this stuff.
And in the state of North Carolina, we have the North Carolina Digital Learning Initiative funds that our legislature has put in recurring funding every year. And we utilize at the department, we utilize that funding for these types of things. So we do digital leaders exchange, which is allowing all of our digital leaders to get together every quarter to kind of have these types of discussions and to share best practices and to learn about the new research and resources that are out there. We do it in 4 different locations across the state, again, for accessibility. We do North Carolina Beacons of Leadership Development, which is it's kind of like it's a technology conference that happens in all 8 of our regions across the state. in the summer so that teachers have an opportunity for professional development face-to-face at no cost to them around these types of things. We have coaching collaboratives, AI Summit, School Library Media Collaborative, and we have a number of other things that we put together using that funding. So for us, it was really, it's really funded from our legislature with a specific line item. But we also will apply for grants and some other things if we need additional funding.
Thank you both for sharing. Those are all the questions in the chat.
Great. Thank you, Heather. So I will ask my final question and offer a huge thank you both for being with us today. But my last question is, if you are talking to an audience of state policymakers right now, what advice do you have in terms of the crafting and the development of the toolkits, slash, like, what do you wish you'd known when you were starting this out, to close this out?
I can jump in. One thing I wish I had known was to talk to the naysayers and the non-experts. That's what we've been calling them at the beginning. So we put such an emphasis on talking to the experts, and you should absolutely talk to the experts. But if you're building a resource that is, on mile 50, and someone in a school district throughout your state is just getting started, if they can't apply what they are reading, what they're learning, what that resource is to what they are trying to build in their school district, depending on the resources that are available to them, you're going to miss the mark. So talk to those that have doubts, make sure they're in the conversation from day one, because you will learn a lot and you will be able to build a better resource for them. And then the other part is buy-in is very critical. Going back to the other end of the spectrum, definitely incorporate all those experts, get them on board early, make sure you're listening to what they are advising you on and refining your resource based on that. And the buy-in is huge. So
I think Drew said most of the things. I hate to say that, but yeah, just trying to get that buy-in and making sure that you're having conversations with all the people, and actual conversations, not just here's a survey, what do you think? We did some of that. I wish we had been able to do more of that before it kind of went out, but we built it, put it out with the best research and everything that we saw and had access to. And then we had a lot of those conversations after, which 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, right? Like it would have been nice to have some of those, bigger conversations across the entirety of the state before the initial went out. But at the same time, I think it's so new that once it went out, it was easier to have conversations because we had a starting point. Everybody kind of had a pre-work. They could look at it and go, well, I saw this and I saw that. And I think there was also some nervousness of, what if we don't get this right? What if we say something and it changes tomorrow? And that's whenever we realized we had to make it, a living document. But there was a lot of anxiety of, we're going to put this out and it's not going to be right because something new is going to come out or something we are not aware of is going to happen. So I think just get the conversation started, get it out, get it, going, and have those conversations, but being very careful not to say, this is what you have to do. It's more along the lines of, these are the best guidelines and practices we have. And like Drew said, now let's come to the table. Where are you? And are you here, or do we need to get you here? And what are the steps in between?
Really important final reflections on who to talk to, how to talk to them. Sometimes you just need something to react to. Sometimes you just need to figure out that it's not crocheting a shark, to really kind of hone in on the work. Well, thank you both so much. I'm sure we could do this conversation again in a year and you would have a whole new set of insights. So might tap you for that, but really, really appreciate your time today. For participants, we will send out this recording if you would like to share it with anyone. But I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.